everyone, and welcome back to the Phelan-McDermid podcast, sharing research, progress, and hope. Today, we're featuring our last of our three 2023 grant awardees, and we're lucky to have Dr. Milena Andzelm, an instructor at Boston Children's Hospital. She was awarded the Shannon Memorial Neuropsychiatric Illness Grant for her grant titled Investigating Immune and Autoimmune Mechanisms of Neuropsychiatric Decompensation in Phelan-McDermid Syndrome. Welcome, Dr. Andzelm.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So before we get into updates about your specific project, can you share with our families a little bit more about your background and how you found your way into Phelan-McDermid Syndrome?
Definitely. So I'm a pediatric neuroimmunologist at Boston Children's Hospital, which means I see kids whose immune system is attacking the brain in various ways. So I did a combined medical degree and PhD in neuroscience and immunology prior to my residency training in pediatric neurology. And it was actually during this training that I met a girl with Phelan-McDermid syndrome who had had the onset of severe neuropsychiatric illness as a teenager, and she responded well to medications that regulated her immune system. And this really piqued my interest in why this might happen in this syndrome specifically.
Wow, fascinating. And quite the background of MD, PhD. So good for you for sticking it out.
Thank you.
So congrats again on receiving the Shannon Memorial Neuropsychiatric Illness Grant. So can you tell us a little bit more about what your project aims to accomplish?
Thank you. It's been such an honor to meet the Phelan-McDermid syndrome community and learn from all of the families about their experience with Phelan-McDermid syndrome and neuropsychiatric illness. So the goal of our project is to look at whether immune system abnormalities contribute to neuropsychiatric illness in individuals with Phelan-McDermid syndrome more broadly, and we're looking at this in a variety of ways. Before we can look at this, though, the first step we're working on is try to better define who has neuropsychiatric illness, who are we going to call as severe neuropsychiatric illness, and who doesn't, so we can try to compare the immune systems of these two groups. And in this, I'm fortunate to have Tazy Kohlenberg and Audrey Thurm as collaborators, who many in this community know well. And then once we define these groups, we're asking several questions about their immune system. So first, is there a family history of autoimmunity in those who have severe neuropsychiatric illness? Have they also inherited a tendency to have autoimmune diseases separate from SHANK3 variants? Next, are there abnormalities overall in the immune system of those with severe neuropsychiatric illness, using blood work to broadly evaluate various arms of the immune system? And finally, a small pilot project on spinal fluid samples in those with severe neuropsychiatric illness to look for specific antibodies that might be attacking the brain.
That's fantastic. And just for our family members and listeners to know, has there been other work in this area that has really tried to pinpoint some of these immune system or autoimmune disorders related to neuropsychiatric illness and PMS?
So the initial impetus for this autoimmune disorder, neuropsychiatric illness, was kicked off by a paper about 5 years ago from several different neurologists and geneticists in the US. And that described 4 teenage girl patients who had had this neuropsychiatric illness that responded to autoimmune medications.
Okay, fantastic. And it obviously sounds like, your own experience, very early experience with this has really driven some of this. And I love how that you're really tackling it, from the family perspective too, of really looking at some of these other underlying conditions that might be occurring on top of the Phelan-McDermid diagnosis. So where are you with the project now? Any updates, any results you can share with our families?
Such a good question. So I wish I had more updates, but has been my general experience with research, everything always takes longer than expected. But we have done a lot of great data collection. We've enrolled 45 families, and we are now at the point where we have people coming together to start diving into data analysis and gathering blood work. And we've been collecting spinal fluid samples. We have samples coming in from around the US. So I'm really excited for this next analysis phase to move forward.
Great. Those are some impressive numbers so far. Because we are on a podcast now, do you need any more samples? Do we need to do a little recruitment pitch?
I would love to do a recruitment pitch. So anyone with Phelan-McDermid syndrome who has a child age 10 and older, please reach out to us. We have had tremendous support from the community already. We're so excited about the patients we've collected, but there is a real strength in numbers here in terms of being able to really fully describe the syndrome and look for relationships with autoimmune history and such things. So please reach out if you have a child 10 and older. And we really also need patients who both have neuropsychiatric illness and who don't to really be able to compare these groups and try to look at the underlying mechanisms.
Perfect. Well, we will make sure we have that recruitment pitch and who to contact in our show notes for those families. And again, just sort of reiterate, she's looking for 10 and above with Phelan-McDermid syndrome, and it can be individuals with or without neuropsychiatric illness or history of. So one of the things you've mentioned and something we've talked about on the two prior podcasts is that research rarely goes according to plan. Things take longer than they're expected. What kind of challenges have come up along the way that you can share with our families?
Yeah. So as I had said, we set big goals, we set our roadmap of what we want to get done, and projects always take longer than you expect, pretty much. And there's so many factors out of your control. For us, though, I think our primary challenges were getting the study up and running to make sure we were doing it in the right way to protect our patients' privacy and make sure we were protecting enrolled participants. And also, as a first-time clinical researcher myself, there has been a learning curve on how to get this done and how to communicate well with families and finding ways to effectively reach out and recruit and use participants' time wisely. So that we have made great progress on, and we're going to build on it in the future, but that has made our progress a little slower than hoped.
We really appreciate that. Such, the IRB and kind of making sure that human subjects portion of all of the studies are so important. And again, that was something we talked about in our first of these podcasts with Dr. Julia Dahlman of sometimes the IRB really holds you up, and that is completely out of your control.
Yeah.
You also mentioned here that you are a first-time clinical researcher, which we're so glad to be able to provide these grant opportunities for early investigators. You had previously mentioned Dr. Audrey Thurm and Dr. Tazy Kohlberg as some of the collaborators on this project. Any other mentors you want to mention, or sort of like how that mentor process is going as part of the grant?
This is my first foray into clinical research. My training and background is as a basic biomedical researcher, looking at cells under a microscope or working with mice. And there will be a good chunk of my next career stage that will be driven by that. But for some neuroimmune diseases, such as severe neuropsychiatric illness in individuals with Phelan-McDermid syndrome, in my mind, that mechanism is still such a black box that we really have to start with understanding what's going on at a basic level with the patients first. And so that's why I'm trying to incorporate clinical research and learn more about this. One of my main mentors in this project is Dr. Sid Srivastava, and he really excels in this type of research. So that's been really valuable for me to learn the strengths and challenges of this kind of research, where the roadblocks are, where the strengths are, and how we can move past that and, incorporate all these strengths in the future.
Great. Yeah. I mean, you definitely have a very strong powerhouse team helping you along the way and really helping you bridge that basic to clinical translational gap, which is so important. And as I've been learning more and kind of getting more invested in the Phelan-McDermid field, it seems like a lot of basic researchers are really seeing the purpose of bridging that gap. And so I applaud all of you. So anything else you can share with us kind of about some of your more basic work and maybe how that's informing the clinical research too?
The other main focus of my research, as I said, is basic in a research lab where I grow induced pluripotent stem cells from human donors, make them into neurons, and then see how those neurons respond to inflammation. So in this way, I'm trying to model how different individuals' brains might respond differently to inflammation and why some kids might get sick with neuroimmune disorders and others might not. I do hope in the future that I can extend this to donors with Phelan-McDermid syndrome and try to model why their neurons might have unique responses to inflammation that might lead to neuropsychiatric illness. So hopefully, in the end, we'll be able to put both of these sides together and really be able to make some progress in this illness.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be fascinating. So, I know you do some basic research, which is very important, but you also are part of our neuropsychiatric consultation group. And for families, as a refresher, this was a collaboration between the Phelan-McDermid Syndrome Foundation and the Seaver Autism Center at Mount Sinai to really provide a service for medical providers that allows providers to consult with experts in the field about individuals with Phelan-McDermid syndrome who have challenging neuropsychiatric conditions. This provider to provider service really follows this larger echo model, which has been used in various medical fields, including within autism. The Neuropsychiatric Consultation Group, or the NCG, as we call it, has consulted over 80 cases so far, which is really impressive. And this has been done across the world. So you yourself, Dr. Andzelm, is one of the providers that has been on many of these calls. And so I'm sure the families would love to hear a little bit more about your experience.
It's been a real honor to be involved in these cases and actually very valuable for me also. I've been involved in maybe a dozen or so cases so far, and I wasn't familiar with the echo model until I joined this. And it's been very rewarding to see the expertise that comes together on these calls. You know, areas of expertise in psychiatry, Phelan-McDermid specialists, neurogeneticists, neurodevelopment folks, the neuroimmunologists, and everyone has their own perspective on Phelan-McDermid syndrome and neuropsychiatric illness, and everyone has their own unique expertise and has seen their own cohort of patients like this. And it's really exciting from both just a general medical perspective to be able to have everyone talking about their experience with this and the different kind of patients they've seen, as well as for just a general service to the Phelan-McDermid syndrome community to be able to get that experience out there. You know, Phelan-McDermid syndrome is a rare disorder, and many people out there have one patient or two patients with it. And it's really exciting that those of us who have more of those patients, can convey that experience and knowledge to people and, you know, hopefully make an impact in these patients' care.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not have said that better. And I'm so glad you, again, sort of as you're training and doing research, you're even getting this additional clinical experience in this area, which is also particularly special. So, families, while this is a provider to provider service only, you are more than welcome to kind of advertise this to your medical providers. And again, we'll put some information in our show notes.
And we've certainly had that happen where a provider has submitted a case and said, the family told us that we should talk to you. And then,
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and then it's been a very productive conversation, you know, and they've learned a lot. We've learned a lot. And, you know, I think it helps push knowledge forward about this in Phelan-McDermid syndrome. So it helps everyone in the end.
Absolutely. Going back to a little bit more of your research, kind of, and thinking about your specific project that we've helped fund, where can we expect to see results, and when can, families look forward to that?
So I'm definitely looking forward to the 2026 Phelan-McDermid Syndrome Foundation Conference and being able to share some concrete results there. And I'm hoping in the next year or two, we will have several publications describing our initial findings. You know, this is definitely we're on the year's timescales in research. That's what we're hoping for and anticipating. And we're already planning out how some of those might look. But really, the purpose of this grant for me is an initial pilot to establish a framework of how we're going to look at Phelan-McDermid syndrome and neuropsychiatric illness with the immune system, and to get some preliminary data to give us a sense of where to go next. So while we do hope to get this data out there into the scientific community and publish, really, we're thinking about the next steps to leading to more and bigger grants and being able to dive deeper into why this happens in some kids.
I definitely want to reiterate that these Phelan-McDermid Syndrome Foundation grants are sizable enough to get that pilot data and to get some really strong data. But really, the idea is to make these a stepping stone for those larger federal grants that will allow you to do so much more with a bigger timeline and bigger budget and everything. And so we are very hopeful that you are able to take it to the next level, because surely you'll have some great findings.
These are our goals as well.
Yeah.
We very much appreciate the support because, you know, this project is, you know, it's a pilot. We're not sure exactly what we're going to find. And so it's really valuable to have the foundation's backing in this as we explore what's going to be the most effective thing to get that next level of funding and expand the project.
Right. Well, keep us updated. I think that's another thing that, for hopefully some researchers that are listening to these podcasts too, is that, I'm really hoping that our grant awardees know they're in our family now, and we're really supportive of their future research endeavors. So before I let you go, anything else you want to share with our PMSF community and the families who are tuning in?
I just wanted to share my gratitude to the families for being willing to participate in the research, for being excited about it, and for sharing their stories with us, because that really shapes how we think about neuropsychiatric illness and how we think about where to go from here. And we're still recruiting. Putting that out there one more time.
Yeah, we will again make sure that's in our show notes. And then now that this is the last of the 3 awardees from 2023, we're going to have a blog post, and any recruitment updates will also be in there. Well, thank you again so much, Dr. Andzelm. This has been a great conversation, and we're so grateful for everything you've already done for the PMS community, and really excited to see kind of where this goes for your project. And to everyone watching, thanks for tuning in to hear from our 2023 grant awardees, and we'll be back soon with another episode. Bye.